In this tutorial video, I'm going to show you my basic techniques for doing beauty retouching to a portrait. This consists of using a do no harm technique where I add layers above the original layer that have all of my retouching paint on them so I don't harm the original layer, and it includes fixing blemishes with the spot healing and the healing brush tool, adding some definition to the eye with blend modes and the blur tool, getting rid of flyaway hair with the clone tool, and then using paintbrush and blend modes to fix the roots in this woman's hair. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a new layer and call this skin, and make sure that you're painting on that layer, so make sure to select it. The first thing I do with every photo is go around and clean up the minor blemishes that are around that photo. And just in the interest of time, I'm not going to do all of these blemishes, but you'll see a few of them. So the spot healing brush tool is the easiest brush. So I'm going to go through and try to get some of the major stuff. And if it doesn't work with a spot healing brush, I'll undo in the history or step back, and I will try it with the healing brush tool. Now be careful with this. If it's freckles or things that are natural to her face, then don't get rid of those, because that's part of her character of her face. And don't go too far with this retouching, because that is not a good thing. There are way too many retouching disasters out there, or we give a false sense of somebody's shape or size, and it's harmful. If you look up France's laws on retouching, you'll find that you can't actually retouch something without a warning label letting people know it's been retouched. So we'll go ahead and fix the skin, and then we can do a new layer and do under eyes. Now usually eyes are dark because that's part of the skull structure, but we want to soften this up, and hers aren't too bad, but we want to soften these areas up and right here. And we don't want to do maybe 100% retouching, but we'll just soften it up a little bit. So I can make my brush a little bit bigger and try to paint. And if that looks good, then leave it, and I don't think it does, so I'll go back. And I'm going to choose my healing brush for this one, and I'll alt-click down here where I like the pixels. And then I'll paint underneath her eye and have it try to blend in, and probably go up to the edit menu and do fade healing brush and bring that down a little bit so that we're still seeing kind of the structure of her eye, but it's a little bit softer now. So I can do alt click here, and again that's alt click or option click depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC. And I really need to fade that one, so I'll do edit, fade healing brush, and bring that down just a little bit. And this is the before and after. So we just softened it a little bit, but we didn't lose the structure of her eye. So we can do the same thing on this side, but again, in the interest of time, we're just going to keep moving. So I can do another layer for the whites of her eyes and just use the spot healing brush, but I'll just leave it on the under eyes even though it's not a part of the under eyes. So we'll get rid of the major veins in her eyes. And there we go. Okay. And we can clean up some of these stray hair. Oops, I should probably go back to the skin layer. Clean up some of these stray hairs around her eyebrow. And be careful, because it could get kind of milky or blurry. And in that case, you might need to use the clone tool or the healing brush tool. So that doesn't look too bad. And there we go. So this area right here where she has these fine blonde hairs, this I would probably do with the healing brush tool, because there's so many different textures and there's not a lot of place to sample from. So when you're doing this, you're going to want to work from the outside in so that you're creating better pixels all the way around the edges. So we'll create a new one, and it's probably not the best name for it, but we'll put mustache. And from here, we'll go in, and choose the healing brush tool. And again, we're going to work from the outside in and make sure to resample all the way around so you're not creating any kind of a pattern. So I'm just sampling near where I think the light matches. And if I need to go back over it just to make sure it blends, then I can. And we're starting to get somewhere. So we don't want to lose her smile because that's kind of what makes this picture good. So we might need to make our brush really, really small and paint some of that pink back in to get rid of the hairs that overhang on her lip. Being really careful to try to keep the structure of the lip. So you can do the other side on your own if you had this picture, but it would be the exact same process. I would work in and have the lips be the last part of it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to enhance the eyes so that they're easier to see from a distance, and it just kind of provides some pop because the eyes are where people are going to look at first in every portrait. So I'll create a new layer and I'll type define eyes. And I'm going to change this layer to a multiply mode, which is going to take whatever pixels I paint on and multiply them, make them darker. And I will use the blur tool to blur whatever pixels are there. Now I'm going to change from my hand tool to the rotate view to sort of turn this, and that's going to allow me a little bit easier way to paint. So again, with my blur tool selected, make sure it says sample all layers and watch your strength. And I think 50%, if I were to do that, it's way too much. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to change my percentage down to about 11, 10 or 11, whatever works. And I'm going to paint along her lash line just to add a little bit more definition and strength. And I can go over these lashes if I need to, and then go along the outside edge of her eye here to add just a little bit of pop. So I'll keep painting this one, and you can really decide on how dark or light this needs to be. Oops, I didn't do a very good job on that one. It just really depends on the person, how big the photo is, what the lighting is, what color their eyes are. But if I go back to my rotate view, go back, turn that on and off, that's giving it a little bit of pop. So from far away, if I turn it on and off, you can see it. It's subtle, but it does add definition to the eye. So the last couple of steps are to work with her hair. And I'm going to use the clone tool to get all the stray flyaways here and increase my brush size. And as always, make sure that it says normal mode and it's all layers or at least current and below. And we'll zoom in. And for this clone tool, you're going to want it to follow your brush. So for all these stray hairs out here, I'm going to do Alt click. And as you can see, it's going to follow my brush along. And so I'll Alt click back here, paint that in. And I just painted an edge because it got too close, so I'll Alt click up here and try to fix that. So you might not want to do a totally soft edge for this because then it's just going to create some areas that kind of look like flyaways, kind of look like blurry. And I just messed that one up too. Alright, and there's some by her ears, so again I'll Alt click here so it follows my brush along. We've got one out here, so Alt click. And I'll do this all the way around her hair. And nobody's really going to notice if you kind of cut into the hair a little bit. So don't be too crazy meticulous with this unless it absolutely calls for it. And there, that gets rid of some of the flyaway hairs. So, oops, and it's still got a little spot going right there. Okay, so the last step for this is to lighten the roots, the dark areas of our hair. And this is kind of like the teeth whitening method that I did a tutorial video on. You can check my YouTube channel for that. So we'll do roots for this one. And we're going to change it to the soft light blend mode. And for this one, we're going to go to the paintbrush and we are going to sample the lightest blonde of our hair near the roots. So we'll choose this one and you can move it up a little bit if you want to. We'll do there. And we'll make this a little bit bigger. And we want some softness. Well, actually quite a bit of softness. And then we'll paint that in. Oops, I went backwards. That way. There we go. And I think I'm going to make that totally soft. So now this might be a little bit too strong, but as always, you can change the opacity of this layer after the fact to try to get it just a little hint of better roots. And I went a little bit too far into this area that was already too blonde, so I can come in with my eraser tool and again make my eraser tool super soft and get rid of that area that didn't need it necessarily. So then I would just do the top over here, and I might create a whole new layer because the color of her hair is different here than it is here, and then do these ones right here. But otherwise, that's pretty much the retouching process. And for the most part, that is what I do for every single image that I have to retouch. And again, we're leaving that original layer intact just in case we make any mistakes. And this allows us to see there's our skin layer, and we can take the eraser to any areas we mess up without erasing any of the pixels that actually were on the original photo.